Some missions never make it to the news. Some operations aren't recorded in any database, not even black sites. This was one of them. The facility had no name, just an isolated stretch of frozen earth, miles from civilization, buried beneath layers of snow and ice. A place where secrets were kept and silence was enforced. The air tasted like rust. The floors were cold concrete, sterile and silent. A dim, flickering overhead light was the only thing that disrupted the dull monotony of the narrow hallways. Behind reinforced steel doors, beyond layers of security and surveillance, lay the heart of Project Ursa. A research group led by Dr. Ana Velasquez, a woman with a reputation for pushing the boundaries of science, had spent years working on a task many thought impossible: transferring human consciousness into another living being. A soldier dying of cancer volunteered to be their test subject. Corporal Marcus Hale was the last of his kind. 32 years old, grizzled, worn out by years of combat. A dying man, beaten down by a merciless disease. He had 4 months to live. "I want to live," he had said, "even if it's not in this body." The military saw his sacrifice as a matter of national interest. The public never knew, but in the depths of the cold lab, this was going to be their breakthrough, humanity's next step toward immortality. The bear came in just a week before, a massive grizzly, wounded by hunters and caught in traps. The creature's mind was primal, instinctual, nothing more than a survivor, fighting for dominance over its territory. But the team's goal wasn't just to save Marcus Hale. They wanted to transcend human limits. They wanted to conquer death by merging the human mind with the raw, untapped power of an animal. If they succeeded, they'd rewrite the rules of nature. The impossible would become reality. Marcus' body was already failing when the procedure began, but they kept him awake for the transfer, his mind sharp, conscious of the horror that was about to unfold. They sedated the bear, ensuring it couldn't fight back. It was already in a cage, its muscles tense but restrained. The process was intense. Marcus was strapped into the operating chair, electrodes and sensors glued to his scalp. His body shivered, fragile and weak, barely holding on to life. The bear's skull was drilled into neural mesh inserted deep within its brainstem, and the human consciousness was linked. The first sparks of the connection burned through Marcus' synapses, the pain unimaginable. He screamed in agony, but it wasn't his voice that echoed through the chamber. No, it was the low, guttural growls of the bear that responded. The transfer wasn't clean. It wasn't smooth. The doctors hadn't expected it to be. They couldn't. The procedure was far too experimental, a twisted idea too unnatural to work perfectly. They only hoped the mind wouldn't reject the body. For days, the bear didn't move. It sat in the containment chamber, silent and still, staring through the glass at the scientists who studied it. Dr. Velasquez kept her distance. She could feel something was wrong. The scans didn't show any immediate signs of failure, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something deep inside the creature's mind had shifted. The researchers ran test after test, monitoring the neural patterns that flickered in its brain. The scans were unlike anything they'd ever seen. Fragmented, confusing, and deeply human. There was awareness, not just from the bear's primal instincts, but a spark of something far more complex. Memory, recognition, and the faintest hint of personality began to surface. "It's working," Dr. Velasquez whispered to herself, her breath fogging the glass. She stared at the monitor as she typed her findings. "It's working, but it's not just the bear anymore." The silence stretched on. The bear watched, but the more the scientists studied, the more they began to notice the slight changes. The bear would occasionally look at them, not with the same primal hunger they expected, but with a strange recognition, almost like it was waiting, observing. The officers in charge of security laughed it off. "Just a damn bear," they said. "A big one, but it's still just a bear." But something about the way it looked at them made them uneasy. There was an intelligence behind its eyes, an intelligence that felt out of place. It was 3 days before the first incident. By then, Dr. Velasquez had nearly convinced herself that the transfer had been a failure, that they were witnessing the last vestiges of Marcus' mind, clinging to life in the bear's failing body. But on the third day, something broke. Private Lewis had been on watch that night. He was young, barely 21, and had never seen combat. His hands shook as he ran security checks, checking the cameras. He glanced up at the monitor and froze. The bear wasn't in the containment chamber. It had gotten out. Screams echoed through the halls as Private Lewis was the first to fall. His body was found mangled, contorted in ways no human should be. His rifle was snapped in half. The walls were covered in jagged streaks of blood, smeared almost as if someone or something had taken the time to paint with it. The bear had killed with cold precision. It wasn't mindless. It wasn't simply driven by hunger. It was something more, a twisted version of Marcus' mind, trapped inside the animal, was beginning to twist the bear's body into something grotesque. By the time Dr. Velasquez reached the containment block, the air was thick with tension. The glass chamber was shattered. The bear was nowhere to be seen. "Get to the armory, now." The command came from Captain Mercer, his voice low and strained. The team scrambled, but they knew, deep down, that they had already lost control. One by one, the scientists were picked off. Some ran, some fought back, but none of them survived for long. The bear, now fully free, moved like a specter, patient, watching, waiting. Dr. Velasquez found herself alone, barricaded in the armory. The silence was oppressive. The night dragged on like a slow death, the tension building until the walls seemed to close in. She could hear it, the sound of something large and heavy moving outside the door, the rhythmic padding of paws on concrete. She checked the security footage one last time. The monitors were fuzzy, blinking in and out, but through the static she saw it, the bear. Its eyes glinted, catching the dim light from the cameras. "Marcus?" she whispered, feeling a chill crawl up her spine. The bear tilted its head. It knew her, and then a grin twisted its lips. Or maybe it was just the blood. The air was suffocating, the silence oppressive. Dr. Velasquez huddled in the armory, her back pressed against the cold steel door. Every breath she took seemed louder than the last, echoing through the empty halls, bouncing off the concrete walls that felt as though they were closing in. The emergency lights flickered sporadically, casting sharp shadows that made every corner feel like a potential trap. She could hear it, the sound of something massive moving outside, its footsteps heavy and deliberate. Each thud sent a tremor through the floor, A reminder that the beast was still out there. That Marcus was out there. Her hands were shaking, but she forced herself to focus. She couldn't afford panic. Not now. She glanced over at the stack of weapons on the wall. A rifle, a couple of pistols, a shotgun. She knew she had to be quick, efficient, but nothing felt like it would be enough. How did you fight something like this? A monster that wore the skin of a man? It didn't make sense. The transfer was supposed to work. It had been a breakthrough. This wasn't supposed to happen. But she had seen the footage. She had heard the screams. It was Marcus, but it wasn't. It was something else entirely. The first survivor, Sergeant Wade, had been in charge of security. He was an older man, weathered by years in combat, but no one had ever prepared him for what came next. He had taken the lead, tried to rally what was left of the team, but all he had found was death. Wade had been one of the first to face the bear. It had come silently out of the shadows, moving with the grace of a predator but with the mind of something far worse. Wade had raised his rifle, the instinct to protect coursing through him, but it was useless. The bear, Marcus, didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. In one fluid motion, the bear lunged, and Wade was gone, his body ripped apart as easily as a rag doll. There had been no fight. The bear didn't just kill. It hunted, played with its prey. It watched them die, as if it were savoring every moment. Dr. Velasquez couldn't afford to think about what had happened to the others. She had to survive. She had to finish this, for Marcus' sake, for the mission. But as the minutes stretched on, she began to feel the weight of her decision, the crushing burden of what she had been a part of. She wasn't naive. She had known the risks. She had known the ethics, the morality of it all. But she had never imagined it would go this far. She had never imagined that the thing they had created would become something inhuman. A low growl interrupted her thoughts. She froze, her heart thundering in her chest. It was close, too close. She lifted the rifle in her trembling hands, checking the chamber. She was no longer a scientist. She was a soldier now. Her mind screamed at her to stay calm, to think. But all she could do was listen to the sound of the bear's breathing growing louder, closer. A soft thud against the steel door, then silence. Velasquez's breath caught in her throat. The creature was outside. She wasn't sure how long she'd been sitting there when the door finally creaked open, just a few inches, enough to see the massive, hulking shadow of the bear filling the gap. Its eyes gleamed in the dark, pools of liquid gold that seemed to pierce straight through her. It wasn't the bear she had seen in the containment chamber. No, this was something different. This was Marcus. But it wasn't. His mind had twisted, distorted by the force of the transfer, and now the bear's instincts were combined with something darker, something more intelligent, more calculated. The door groaned louder as the bear shoved it open, step by slow step, its heavy paw prints leaving bloody streaks on the floor. For a moment, the world stood still. Then, the bear's lips curled upward in a grin. It wasn't just the blood or the feral gleam in its eyes. No, this was a smile, a grin, a flash of recognition. Marcus. And then, a low, guttural voice broke through the silence. Anna. The voice wasn't the bear's. It was Marcus, or at least a twisted version of it. A broken reflection. You shouldn't have done this. Dr. Velasquez stumbled back, but there was nowhere to go. She had no escape. She had created this. She had torn a man's soul apart and forced it into an animal. And now that decision was hunting her down. She raised the rifle, her finger trembling on the trigger, but the bear's gaze didn't falter. It just watched, as though it were savoring her fear. In that moment, she understood. The creature in front of her wasn't just a bear with a man's mind, a punishment for what they had done. She had thought they were transcending the laws of nature, but instead, they had unleashed something that should never have been disturbed. The rifle shot out, the sound deafening in the quiet room. But the bear was faster. It lunged, its jaws snapping inches from her face. Anna barely managed to sidestep, the bear's claws raking across her shoulder. She screamed in pain, her blood spilling onto the floor, but she didn't hesitate. She pushed herself back up, firing again, this time landing a shot in the bear's side. It didn't stop. It didn't flinch. The bear only paused for a moment, its head tilting as it analyzed the wound. Its expression shifted. It wasn't anger that twisted its face. No, it was something else. You think this will stop me? Marcus' voice rumbled from deep within the bear's chest, twisted by the animal's growls. Dr. Velasquez's heart pounded as she readied the rifle again. I have to stop you, she whispered to herself. I have to end this. And with that, she fired once more. But Marcus was faster this time. The hallway was soaked in blood and chaos. Lights flickered overhead, sputtering like dying stars. Every inch of the facility reeked of gunpowder, steel, and something darker, the raw stench of death. Ana Velasquez stumbled through the corridors, clutching her bleeding shoulder, her mind spinning from blood loss and terror. Behind her, the heavy, guttural breathing of Marcus, the bear, echoed off the walls. It was no longer stalking, no longer hunting. It was playing. The few remaining survivors, engineers, guards, fellow scientists had tried to fight. Anna had heard their screams tearing through the radio static minutes ago. One by one, they were silenced. She wasn't naive anymore. She knew she was alone. And deep inside, she knew that Marcus wasn't just killing them for revenge. He was punishing them. She ducked into the control room, bolting the door behind her. Massive monitors lined the walls, still flickering with security feeds. One by one, each camera showed the same thing. Empty corridors soaked in blood, and in the center of it all, Marcus. He stood now in the courtyard, under the stormy night sky, blood dripping from his fur, his massive chest rising and falling slowly. In the security feed, his head turned toward the camera, toward her. It was as if he could see her, as if the walls and monitors meant nothing anymore. Anna staggered back from the screens, heart hammering so violently it blurred her vision. This wasn't survival anymore. It was judgment. She collapsed into a chair, her blood staining the floor, and stared up at the ceiling. For a few fleeting moments, she let herself remember. The first time she had met Marcus. The hollow look in his eyes when he signed the forms to volunteer. The way he spoke about dying without fear, without hope. He had trusted her. He had trusted them all. And they had betrayed that trust, turned him into a vessel of their ambition and pride. A soldier dying with dignity had been twisted into a beast born of desperation. This is my fault. All of it. The reinforced door behind her creaked. Slow, deliberate. Her blood ran cold. She turned, knowing what she would see. The steel door shuddered under the weight of a blow. Once, twice. Then it gave way with a shriek of tearing metal. Standing there, framed by the storm behind him, was Marcus. His eyes were unmistakable. Somewhere deep in that monstrous body, Marcus Greaves still stared out. But there was no humanity left. Only rage. Only betrayal. The bear lumbered forward, paws slick with blood, his breath a hot gust in the freezing air. Anna raised the last weapon she had, a small sidearm she had scavenged, and aimed it at him. He didn't charge. He didn't roar. He spoke. Why? A single broken word, torn from lips that weren't meant to speak anymore. Anna's hand trembled. Tears blurred her vision. "I'm sorry, Marcus," she whispered. "We were wrong. We played God." The bear took another step closer. His shadow fell across her like a tide swallowing the shore. Anna squeezed the trigger once, twice, 3 times. The bullet struck home, thudding into the bear's chest. He staggered but didn't fall. Instead, he did something far worse. He smiled. A cruel, jagged, almost devious smile that split his bloodied maw. And then he collapsed. Took Anna 10 minutes before she could move again. The silence was deafening. She approached the massive body, the gun still trembling in her hand. She stood over him for what felt like hours, watching the last ragged breaths shudder from his ruined form. Marcus was dead. But as she looked into his open, glassy eyes, she didn't feel relief. She felt emptiness. Guilt that would never wash clean. The experiment had worked. They had transferred a soul into another vessel. But they hadn't preserved it. They had broken it. Days later, Anna sat alone in a government hearing room, silent as stone while the suits whispered and scribbled notes. She signed non-disclosure papers, watched as Project URSA was wiped from every record, every mention, every mind except her own. The story would never see the light of day. The bear would never exist. Marcus Greaves would never have lived beyond his final breath. But Anna knew. She would always know. When she closed her eyes at night, she could still hear him, asking her again and again, "Why?" What do you think really happened that night? Was the consciousness of Marcus truly transferred into the bear? Or did something far darker take root inside that vessel? Was it science, or something far beyond human understanding? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Was Marcus a victim, or the real monster all along? If you love chilling stories like this, exploring the beauty, mystery, and raw power of the natural world, and its darkest unknowns, subscribe to Wild Continuum Unveiled. We journey where others dare not go.